Tonight on The Verdict Zone, we're diving into a story where a sister's toxic jealousy became a weapon, creating the perfect hunting ground for a predator. The plan was simple. The bride, Elaine, wanted to humiliate our protagonist. She insisted she bring a childhood friend, a guy with a troubled past, as her date to the wedding. What Elaine didn't count on was who would actually show up. The man who walked through that door wasn't just a date, he was a performance. Let's call him Carson. He was handsome, charismatic, and seemed to know exactly what to say to counter every single one of Elaine's passive-aggressive jabs. He played the part of the perfect, reformed gentleman so flawlessly that he not only charmed the entire wedding party but also completely won me over. I was so relieved, so caught up in the moment, that I let my guard down entirely. I genuinely believed I had reconnected with an old friend who had turned his life around. For one night, I thought my sister's cruel setup had backfired spectacularly. I felt a real connection, a spark that felt authentic and exciting. It was the perfect date, built on the perfect lie. He was so convincing, so attentive, that I invited him back to my place. The night felt like a fairy tale, a small victory against my sister's constant belittling. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up, leaving just a note. It felt a little strange, but I brushed it off. Later that day, a text from my other sister completely shattered that illusion. It was a photo from her old high school yearbook. And the face staring back from the page under the name Rodney was not the man who had been in my apartment just hours before. The man I knew as Carson was an imposter. Panic set in. My friend Maya rushed over, and we immediately went into crisis mode, changing every password I had, locking down my social media, and securing my digital life. My mind was racing. Who was this guy? How did he know so much about me, about my family? We found the real Rodney on LinkedIn, a successful professional, a family man, someone who looked nothing like the charming stranger who had just left my bed. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This wasn't some random, opportunistic lie. This was a calculated violation. The imposter knew about Elaine's cruelty, he knew my family's dynamics, and he used that knowledge to target me specifically. I wasn't just deceived, I was hunted. I knew I had to find answers. I reached out to the real Rodney, who was shocked and disturbed. He confirmed my fears, he knew the imposter. Carson was a distant childhood acquaintance, someone who had always held a grudge against Elaine and her popular, mean-spirited circle of friends. This wasn't about me at all. It was about revenge. I was just the pawn in his twisted game against my sister. He used my identity, my trust, and my body to get back at her. The violation felt deeper and more sickening. This new information wasn't enough, I needed to know who I was dealing with. I hired a private investigator named Tanner. What he uncovered was terrifying. Carson had a criminal record for fraud. But worse, much worse, was a recent restraining order filed against him by an ex-partner. Her statement was a chilling echo of my own experience. She described the exact same pattern: intense love bombing, identity deception to gain trust, and then a complete refusal to accept boundaries when the relationship ended. He wasn't just a con artist, he was a patterned predator. Armed with this horrifying truth, I went to the police. They told me that because he hadn't made any explicit threats, pressing criminal charges for fraud or stalking would be difficult. But I refused to be a sitting duck. After he continued to contact me, ignoring my demands to be left alone, I took matters into my own hands. I filed for a civil restraining order. Walking into that courtroom was one of the scariest things I've ever done, but it was also my first true act of self-protection. The judge saw the pattern of deception and harassment for what it was and granted the order. My next confrontation was with Elaine. I finally stood up to her, making it crystal clear that her cruelty, her need to see me humiliated, was the key that unlocked the door for this predator to walk into my life. I drew a line in the sand, establishing firm, non-negotiable boundaries with my entire toxic family system. For the first time, I chose my safety over their comfort, and I started therapy to unpack a lifetime of ignoring red flags just to keep a fragile peace that never really existed. In the end, justice found its own way. Carson eventually violated the terms of his existing probation in a completely separate incident, and he was sent to jail. It wasn't the direct consequence of what he did to me, but it was a consequence nonetheless, and it brought a sense of closure. This whole ordeal was a brutal, terrifying wake-up call. It forced me to see the truth about my family and, more importantly, about myself. I learned to stop seeking validation from people who only wanted to tear me down. I learned to trust my gut, to listen to that inner voice that had been screaming about red flags for years. I reclaimed my life, not by waiting for an apology, but by building a fortress of self-respect and unbreakable boundaries. Now, the moral verdict is yours. When does family loyalty become a dangerous form of self-betrayal? The verdict zone is open. Hit that subscribe button and click the link in the description to join the conversation on our forum. And to see more stories like this, check out the Verdict Zone channel. Your story might be next.